wanted to point out that welcome to the Homestead Academy, and Kate is in her new location now. Kate is now the Somerset County Agricultural Agent. She's no longer with us in Burlington. So we're still going to keep doing this. And this is a topic that's come up quite a bit. As I was telling Kate before, besides honeybees, I think poultry is like one of the entry level where we get into with people who are interested in small scale farming or homesteading. And with that, Kate and I have noticed there's been a lot of questions on what can and can't be done. So I'm going to turn it over to Kate, who's done a lot of work in lining up all of our speakers today. So Kate, it's all yours.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, we see this as definitely an entry-level topic, entry-level practice for homesteaders. And so we wanted to sort of get ahead of what you can and can't do by inviting a lot of people to the table who can provide those answers to you. So we have representatives from federal, state, and local government to sort of explain how all those agencies work together to provide the guidelines for how to start selling eggs or processed poultry from your homestead or farm. So I want to begin just by letting our 4 roundtable speakers give an introduction to themselves. And then we're going to hear a short presentation from our colleague at the Department of Agriculture, the State Department of Ag, about sale of eggs, before we dive into more of a roundtable discussion about the sale of processed poultry. So why don't we begin with our federal partner here? Paul, why don't you kick it off?
Good morning. My name is Paul Brown. I am a compliance investigator with the United States Department of Agriculture. Part of my job is to make sure that different types of operations, organizations, and businesses are in compliance with federal guidelines. And I'm very happy to be here and to be of assistance to this group. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Jessica?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jessica Swift. I am the Retail Food Project Coordinator for the New Jersey Department of Health. I have been here for about 2 years, and the main portion of my position is to provide advice and guidance for locals under Chapter 24 Retail Food Code.
Excellent. Suzanne?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Suzanne Fager. I work at the Burlington County Health Department. I've been here for 21 years. I'm a registered environmental health specialist, and I do retail food inspections. And so I enforce Chapter 24, the Retail Food Code. And when we come across issues that arise, we often do have to reach out to Jessica and get some advice and see where we are and interpret the code. And as for some of the other issues that come up with we live kind of in a rural area. So when we have questions about farms and birds, and we've had the chicken questions come up in the past here, we do reach out to Department of Ag, New Jersey Department of Ag specifically. I'm really excited to be here today. So thank you.
Thanks for joining us again, Suzanne. Okay, John, why don't you tell us about yourself, and you can pull up your slides to get started.
Sounds good. Okay, let me share my screen. I'll do the introduction while doing that. My name is John Keller. I am the supervising agricultural products agent for the New Jersey Department of Agriculture. I was asked to present today by my supervisor, Chris Kleingunther. He just asked me to give you guys a broad overview of the egg marketing regulations for the state. Might not apply to everybody, but I figured I'd just hit kind of a couple points, and then if there are any questions, I can take those. So I guess I'll just get started. Yeah, like I said, New Jersey egg marketing law presentation. Just a broad overview. The law is related to storing, marketing, processing, labeling, and transporting of eggs. It applies to consumers, retailers, and other purchasers of eggs. Some things contained in the law, like standards, grades, and size weight classes, have been developed in adherence to USDA standards and guidelines. This is probably the most relevant part for this meeting. Producers are exempt from the regulation if their flock does not exceed 3,000 birds, but they may only sell at site of production or an established business away from the farm. and sale of eggs shall not exceed more than 30 dozen to a single customer. Even though they are exempt, standards of quality, grade, sanitation, refrigeration, and records shall still be maintained. And we encourage them to register with the State Department of Agriculture, but that's not required. As far as the containers go in which the eggs must be sold and marketed, they must display the following: the grade, the size, weight class of the eggs, the word eggs, the numerical count of the contents, and the name and address of the packer or distributor. No person shall advertise eggs for sale unless the abbreviated grade and size, weight class are conspicuously designated in block letters, at least half the size of the tallest letter in the word eggs, or the tallest figure in the price, whichever is larger. Letters and numbers used to designate the grade and size, weight class shall be clearly legible, boldface type, and at least 3/8 inches in height. I think the main takeaway here is it has to be legible and, you know, in a way that is conspicuous that everybody can tell that that's what the container is. There are temperature and humidity requirements. If you are assembling, transporting, marketing, or processing eggs for market, you must keep the eggs temperature below 60 degrees Fahrenheit and relative humidity lower than 70%. And all clean containers and storage areas must be clean, sanitary, and free of odor. And then I guess if it is determined after inspection that eggs are being offered, displayed, stored, or processed in violation of the law, a stop sale may be issued. It'll remain in effect until it is determined eggs are no longer in violation of the law. And eggs determined to be in violation of the law may also be confiscated, and a county or municipal court may be used to determine if any enforcement action is necessary. Any person who violates the rules and regulations shall be liable to a penalty of no less than $50 and no more than $100 for the first offense. Second offense is no less than $100 and no more than $200. And the third offense is no less than $300 and no more than $500. But after that third penalty, every day of which the additional violation occurs shall be considered an additional violation. So that is considered another penalty added on. And if the fines are not paid or violations are not corrected, a state or municipal court may decide to take further legal action. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I tried to keep it pretty broad. I'll take any questions if there are any. Or if you guys want to reach out, I can leave you guys my email. If you have any questions after the meeting, I'd be happy to take them.
John, we have a question in the chat. The question is the 30 dozen limit per buyer based on per sale or per year, etc.?
Per sale, I'm 90% sure it's per sale, but I'll double check and get back. But as I don't want to definitely say, but I'm like 99.5% sure it's per sale.
Okay. John, as you'll find out, this is a audience with a lot of questions. You know, Bill and
Yeah, no
myself
worries.
completed. So I did have a couple questions. One, I wanted to know, where is this information available for people to find for their own, you know, review after?
Okay, so yeah, I should have covered that in the beginning. It's on the first slide. So the New Jersey State Authority statute, let me just make sure. State Authority 4:1-11-1, 43-11.12. So basically it's all in the state statute, or I can actually just put a link directly in the chat if that works for people. It takes you directly to the law. I can do that. I'll drop that in the chat so everybody has it.
That would be great. And
Okay.
if you do want to register with the state, is that through the Department of Ag website, or how do you go about registering?
Yeah, so it would be through our website. There's links there for egg, feed, produce, that'll direct you where you need to go.
And one question that always comes up is washing of the eggs. Maybe you can address like guidelines for how that should be done.
So as far as I know, it's not required, but I don't believe it's prohibited. But also, I am not an expert on this subject, so I would probably have to defer to someone else who is. But as far as I know, it's not required.
Suzanne or anyone else, do you want to jump in with any recommendation?
So we have a farmer that we inspect. He's so the local farmers markets, and he has a small flock. And we'll go out and we'll check his refrigerator, make sure that it's appropriate temperature wise, because it's essentially a servicing area. He's on a well, so we make sure his water is tested and approved, and that he's using approved water for washing the eggs. But in terms of the process for washing eggs, that's not something that I have anything on either, actually. I just make sure it's approved. It's an approved water source.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Okay. And you're conducting those inspections because of the sale at a farmer's market specifically, as opposed
Exactly.
to okay.
Exactly. Once it's at a farmer's market, we have to make sure it comes from an approved source. And we have to make sure that it's being transported appropriately, it's being stored appropriately. And then again, if you're washing the eggs, we want to make sure that it's an approved water source that's being used for that purpose. In terms of like the farm side stands, and if they're being sold on site, we don't usually know about them most of the time, to be honest. But when they're selling at like a farmer's market, we have to check into it.
And I think that's what our regulation is for, is those smaller producers who may have a few chickens or a decent amount of chickens, but fall underneath of that regulation threshold. It's just for them to, label their stuff properly.
Understood. If anyone has questions for John or Suzanne at the local level about egg sales, you can feel free to drop those in the chat, or any questions that you have as we carry on. Bill, did you have any more questions?
I'm good. I think the bigger issue we get into is more the poultry and dealing with the poultry itself.
Yes, definitely. So why don't we begin with our sort of roundtable discussion about sale of processed poultry. Paul, you and I have had a lot of good conversation about, why to talk about this and sort of the big picture in all the intergovernmental relationships. So maybe you could speak to that, and then we can try to give some specific scenarios that you can all address.
Yes, thank you, Kate. Kate, first, I'd like to introduce our Deputy Regional Director of the Compliance and Investigations Division, Tom Calero, who is on this call. Tom started, in inspection investigations, and he is a wealth of information. And I thank you, Tom, for being on this call today.
Good afternoon, everyone.
When Kate reached out, I was very excited, and I was very excited for a lot of reasons. This group that we're speaking with is looking for guidance and information, and sometimes it's very hard to get it at one stop. We do operate in an environment where we have all these rules and regulations. The rules and regulations aren't there to hamper people's rights or businesses. They're there for food safety protection. They're there for accountability from both, safety of the consumer, safety of and concerns, protections for the processors, as well as the government agencies where these operations do exercise their rights to produce such products. This is a vast, there could be thousands and thousands of questions. And I'm just thinking to myself, fueling some questions from the crowd. Again, everything is a case-by-case basis. We do operate in New Jersey, which is a home rule state. And when I say home rule, I say that we have local, state, and federal guidelines and authority. And within those authorities and those guidelines and those regulations, there is a coordination between agencies. So this way, this group is here. We do have people from different levels of government here on the panel. And our information that we're going to be able to provide is from a federal, it's federal regulations. It's from either the Poultry Products Inspection Act, which we call the PPIA for short, and also for the Egg Products Inspection Act, the EPIA. So within those acts, there are exemptions. And that's kind of why we're here today. There's certain exemptions that you, the audience, can exercise. I did provide Kate with the guidance. It's a document called Guidance for Determining Whether a Poultry Slaughter or Processor Operation is Exempt from Inspection Requirements of the Act. So when historically, when you hear the USDA, you think of an inspector, and we have operations, not only egg operations or poultry, but also meat operations that are conducted under federal inspection, under a grant of inspection. And even for those operations still require local approvals, state approvals, whether it be from a food safety standpoint, a design of a building, from an environmental standpoint, wastewater, runoff, quality of water, well water. There's a lot of different regulations that are there in order for a business to be in compliance. And what I'm speaking upon is the federal establishments where we're under the Food Safety Inspection Service under the USDA. A service is provided free. That service then comes with the grant of inspection. The grant of inspection has criteria. And with federal inspection, if you're looking for sales, provided you go through all the approvals and you have federal inspection as a service, it's unlimited the amount of poultry you can produce, who you're going to sell it to. It's able to go over state lines once it has marks of inspection and it's done under inspection. So more or less, and even if you were to export that, there are procedures, but you're afforded those abilities to do that with that single inspection. Now with exemptions, it's a little bit different. And with exemptions, this guide comes in handy. And I'm not going to kid you. It's a very good guide, but I can't more or less just say in one quick conversation that this is what this is and this is what that is. There's a looking at what type of operation you have, looking at what type of exemption. You can only operate under one exemption. And through that, we look at things and we'll make ourselves available as for a case-by-case basis for anybody that maybe questions aren't going to be answered during this session that want to speak with us. Kate will be able to provide all the necessary information that we can get you help. So we're here to help you. And I sincerely say that because again, if there's an exemption that that fits your operation and it legally can be done, we're here to assist you and to make sure that you are in compliance and that you could exercise that exemption appropriately for your wishes. With that being said, I'd just like to turn this over to Tom. Tom, would you have anything to say to our audience?
No, Paul, I mean, you covered it extremely well. I appreciate your thoughts on the matter, and hopefully, a lot of what we're here for is just to take the fear out of, working under the exemptions. So, and we are a resource, and please utilize us as you can. We'll help you navigate through the exemptions and what you need to do, what you're required to do, what you can do. Again, use this as you can. We are here for your, we have a ton of knowledge and we're happy to share, and we're here for you guys.
Thank you, Paul and Tom. It's helpful to hear that your position is, as a resource in this, especially in this webinar. I did ask for anyone who wanted to submit questions in advance, and we did receive one question that I think could help us address some of the challenges that come up as you're working under a federal exemption, but looking, also trying to decide where you can and can't sell your product. So I just want to read this question, and then hopefully we can get input from our roundtable to discuss how to proceed for this person. So their question was, I slaughter under exemption PL 90-492 in accordance with the law. However, I cannot get product liability insurance because my birds aren't slaughtered at a USDA inspected facility. So because of that, they are not able to sell at farmers markets, as farmers markets require them to have liability coverage. They were wondering how to address this this disconnect. How can they proceed to be able to sell, or basically, how can someone go about selling their birds at a farmer's market legally? So maybe we could speak about that to the audience.
Great. I'm going to attempt to answer that question. So once again, if you are operating under an exemption and you are operating properly within that exemption federally, but there will be another entity, whether it be a local state agency or even a private agency, if their rules are stricter than the federal law, we can't, when I say we can't take a federal law and put it up to something that's more restrictive and say that it's okay. So you wouldn't be in violation of any federal exemption issues or compliance issues. However, it opens up a discussion to, okay, well, if this entity isn't allowing me to do that, how could I do that? The first thing that comes to my mind would be this, is that there is a federal inspection that can be afforded for those birds, where those birds would be federally inspected and you would have unlimited sales with those types of birds that are going to be supplied to a slaughterhouse. Now, I don't want to veer too much into the lanes of how large flocks are or what have you, and I'm going to rely on Tom maybe to weigh in on this as well. But my feeling right off the bat would be, if you have one entity that's not allowing it, there is ways to get inspection done on those birds under federal inspection. I'm going to turn this over to Tom.
Yeah, and this is a tough question that we hear a lot, because I mean, we're dealing with a private entity being the insurance company, right? So I mean, we can't tell the insurance company you need to give this person or this entity insurance. You know, that's truly not our role. But I would say, you know, what if there's a conversation between the homesteader and the insurance company? What does that conversation look like? What are they being the insurance company, what are they looking for as far as assurances that the bird is wholesome, or assurances enough that they would go out on a limb, so to speak, and grant you insurance or sell you insurance, right? Is it a record keeping issue? Is it that they're not sure about this exemption, so it's a flat no? You know, is it simply the inspection issue? And if it's simply the inspection issue, I mean, we do inspect poultry processes under this exemption, you know, give or take once a year, right? Is that all they're looking for? Some sort of inspection that, yeah, the USDA was out here. Here's the proof that they were out here, that I am legally operating under this exemption, right? I mean, we would need a little bit more information to really, like, you know, kind of help bridge that gap. You know, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot other than that we can do. Like Paul said, you can take it and have them inspected, you know, slaughtered and processed under inspection. But yeah, we couldn't be an intermediary between, you know, yourself and the insurance company. Really, that's not our role, but we could help navigate what exactly the insurance company is looking for in order to insure you, if that makes sense.
Thanks,
And
Tom.
I just like to weigh in. You know, I think you're dealing with, maybe let's call it, with an insurance company risk. You know, they're assessing a risk with that exemption, and that's kind of my way in on that. You know, we're looking at, like Tom said, it's a risk between you and the insurance company.
And maybe, you know, record keeping helps the insurance company be a little more comfortable with that risk. Like, you know, I have records of how many birds I brought in. I have records that the flock is healthy. I have records that they were slaughtered in a sanitary manner, meaning, you know, I kept a sanitation operation, you know, record that I did a pre-operational inspection of my equipment that day. My employees are vetted and trained. You know, they're not going to cut off their hand. You know, I trained them on how to slaughter, right? There's not going to be an OSHA type issue here, ideally, right? Hopefully. I have records that the birds were chilled down appropriately and I'm reducing bacterial growth on those finished products, right? I mean, all that may help the insurance company feel more comfortable with granting you insurance.
I saw Suzanne and Jessica nodding their heads earlier. I didn't know if either of you wanted to add response to this question. No, not really. I had a follow-up question though. If someone is processing their birds under this exemption, what is the route to be able to sell those birds if not at a farmer's market due to the liability coverage issue?
Depending on the exemption they're claiming, they can sell them anywhere within New Jersey, right? And if they're a producer grower slaughtering and processing their own birds of their own raising under 20,000 birds annually, they can sell to any entity within New Jersey. Their own farm, right? If they have a farm stand, and obviously I'm not going to upsert local or state jurisdiction, right? Because there may be certain rules in place in Bridgewater versus Piscataway versus, something else, right? So provided you meet, and I think Paul touched on this, provided you meet any local or state ordinances and rules and regs, you can sell them to a restaurant, retail markets. Like I said, a pretty good outlet is direct to consumers, right? You put an ad in your local newspaper saying, I have birds, they're the best thing on earth, come to my farm and buy as many as you want. Right. And then you don't have to worry about, selling your birds to a restaurant for X amount of dollars and the restaurant's taking a chunk of your profit, right? You're selling direct to the consumer. You can charge them whatever the consumer is willing to pay for them.
Kate, there's
Maybe-
a good question that just popped up in the chat, and it goes to the exemptions. I know on certain regulatory programs you can apply for an exemption. The question here is regarding the exemption. Do you apply for an exemption, or are you automatically granted that as long as you're in compliance?
You're automatically, so it's a weird thing with us, right? You would think like you'd have to tell us you're operating and if you open a retail store in New Jersey, right? I assume you'd have to tell someone you're there and you get the proper licensing before you can unlock the door and let people in. With these exemptions, you can just start operating, right? We would expect you to operate, in accordance with the rules and regs that is, clean and sanitary. You're under the 20,000, but you can start tomorrow without letting us know you're there. It's really on us to come find you and say, hey, I notice you're operating, and we go over the rules and regs. Ideally reach out to us so there's conversation beforehand, just in case something's not up to snuff. But yeah, there's no rule in place saying you need to let us know you're operating before you start.
Go ahead, Jessica.
I'm sorry. So under chapter 24, it has to be an approved source. We would not allow them to sell to like retail food establishments if they weren't being inspected by the USDA.
Thanks, Jessica. Yeah, like I said, I can't speak to chicks, especially in New Jersey, to rules and regs there. And Paul did touch, you have to meet local standards, meet state standards, and then meet federal standards, ideally in that order.
I guess I can throw one out to you, because this is what usually happens to us in the extension office. Somebody starts raising eggs for a while or get into poultry, and then they say they want to step it up and get to the next step. So it sounds like there's multiple paths of who's going to have, like, something to say. Any recommendation if I'm contemplating that on, who to process or who to talk to first? Because I think that's what one of the big questions we run into is people get overwhelmed by the different pathways, and I didn't know if you guys had any advice for people.
I think starting at their local first, right? Because if zoning and the town isn't going to allow them to do any of what they are proposing to do, that's going to be their first roadblock, whether they allow it or not. And if they're going to get permission, and depending on how they want to sell their products, then, checking with, local, town, municipal, and then going to the local health departments, because we are home rule here in New Jersey. And then what'll happen is local will get state involved for questions if they can't answer them, and then I'll get Paul involved or Tom involved for USDA. I feel like following that chain from starting local and then going up is really the proper way to do things. Wouldn't you agree, Suzanne?
Absolutely. Always start with zoning because oftentimes you can't even get past zoning and you're spinning your wheels already just to start. We had a situation in Burlington County a while back where this was an accident we stumbled across because we had an unrelated complaint. And one of our investigators went out and stumbled across a good deal of it was chickens being maintained on the premises, and they were supposedly slaughtering them there, and we had no idea. And so we pulled Department of Ag in, the State Department of Ag, for animal cruelty specifically, and they didn't have any approvals. The township had no idea what they were doing, and so we had a whole interdepartmental meeting about it and what they can do and what they can't do. And we started with zoning was the big piece of it. The facilities they had were completely not appropriate, and they wouldn't get past construction even if they got through zoning. And the animal cruelty pieces of it needed to be addressed, and there was just so many parts to it.
Let me throw this out there. If I'm operating, say, as the 5-acre farm, does that throw any different path or anything in there? Because if I'm raising poultry, would that fall under, you think, some of the exemptions are granted there for right to farm?
Go ahead, Jessica, sorry.
I'm not well versed in the whole right to farm. However, that would be something, right, that falls under ag, I think. So we would definitely be reaching out to them with what would be allowed. And if they would, but I think that's also still tied to the local first, right? And if they have that exemption, then it's really starting the process where they reside, where they pay taxes at, or don't, like wherever that is, and going from there to channel out, because I feel like all of the rest of us agencies have those connections with the other agencies. So that's kind of like the starting point.
The bottom line, start local.
Yeah, I mean, really, that's the smartest thing people can do, because what happens is they start, like Suzanne said, then the complaints start coming in. We don't even know they exist. Then zoning, it's like kind of like starting and asking for forgiveness later. Not asking permission, right? Asking for forgiveness.
Yeah, that probably doesn't work out in their favor.
Oh no, that situation was a disaster. But when we've run across people who have tried to sell chicken at our farmers markets, it has to be from an approved source. Like Jessica said, Chapter 24 is very clear about that. And so we'd have to have some sort of documentation that it came from an approved, which is somewhat open to interpretation based on the types of different inspections that Paul was mentioning. I'm looking through the exemption list now, and I'm kind of blown away. I knew a few of them, but some of them are wow. But we would need some sort of documentation saying that they were an approved source. And what we have sometimes are people send, and not chicken specifically, it's a lot of the other meats, they'll get sent to a certified USDA facility. It'll get, the animals will get processed, they'll get packaged, they'll get labeled, and they'll get it sent back. And that's what we run across mostly at our farmers markets. And we go and we check their freezers, we check their facilities to make sure that they're appropriate for storing and the labels are appropriate.
There is another question in the chat about, you might not be able to answer this specifically. The question is, do you know any insurance companies that insure poultry slaughtered under the exemption? Maybe thinking about, are you familiar with people that are that have been slaughtering under the exemption and are also insured? Or is it specifically just, they have to be processed by a USDA inspected facility to be sold?
They have to be from an approved source, is really what it comes down to. But in terms of the insurance, I wouldn't know anything really about that piece of it. That's not something we get into. It's the farmers markets that require the insurance, not us.
So we've been talking about, sorry, Barry. We've been talking about the exemptions a lot where is the best place for me to direct somebody, or somebody's looking for like the exemptions? Is there a website to go to, or an agency to look up?
Well, Paul had that information. I just Googled poultry exemptions USDA and I got this document.
Okay.
And it's very comprehensive. But again, there's a lot of it that wouldn't pertain to farmers markets anywhere. A lot of it is you have to sell it on site anyway. So it's a lot of information. But again, the local may be more restrictive, and there might be a municipal ordinance that's even more restrictive. We don't have that in my jurisdiction, but there might be, we have municipal ordinances that don't allow chickens in towns at all. You can't have a chicken. You can't have chickens. You can't have chickens for pets. You can't have chickens for any reason. And so that's something to consider. And again, that's where zoning falls in to the equation.
I'd like to add FSIS, that stands for the Food Safety Inspection Service.gov, will get you to our webpage. There are search features, and with search features that you more or less custom exemption, that website there will have a large amount of information. However, when you have a lot of information, you don't want to suffer from information overload, or to read something and say, gee, I could do this. So like Tom said, reach out to us. I talk to Jessica on a regular basis, Swift, with the state of New Jersey. We don't sit and say we don't want people to do this, right? Because we live in America. We have rights. There are laws. There are exemptions. And in order to fit the exemption, there is categories of that fitting of that exemption in, as we explained through the home rule state, through local. So I would encourage people not to get frustrated, but to get informed. And that's, again, why we're doing this. It's easy to say no, 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 especially being a parent. No, I do not want you to play in traffic. I'd like you to play in this yard all locked up. That's why, and I can preface that to say, yes, federal inspection. And I just don't mean to say that loosely, is because there is a quantifier, there's rules, there's regulations, there's an inspector at that facility. There are a lot of, I hear on, I watch, I'm a consumer as well. I watch a lot of shows on the internet and on TV, and I hear different stuff that's said. And the thing is this: you could approach any federal establishment and have stuff slaughtered to your satisfaction, or you feel comfortable with a type of a federal establishment. That is going to be the safest route. However, within these regulations, through that FSIS website, through the coordination of all of our agencies, and I'm going to preface again, we don't want to discourage you, but we do want to encourage you. But there is a process, and that process is for, like I said before, protection for your customers, for your business, because we do live in a litigious society. And overall, for the agencies to sit up here and say, hey, we could do this. We don't want to give you all this information, go into a certain direction and say, geez, I would have never done this. I was under this assumption. So again, if this call, and I see it creeping up, and I'm not going to take anybody more's time, but please reach out to us on a case-per-case basis. We'll be more than happy to try to help you as much as we can.
We have a couple of attendees in the chat pointing out that New Jersey has one or just a handful of USDA inspected facilities for processing poultry, and so it makes it difficult to pursue that for the many operations that want to do that. And I understand also increases the price substantially per bird. So I think people are looking for recommendations about ways that they can process the birds themselves, or you can still get them custom processed by someone that's not USDA inspected, to be able to. Suzanne's looking at me. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but there's numerous slaughterhouses in New Jersey. Few of them are USDA inspected. to my knowledge. And so I think basically what I'm trying to say is that people are looking for routes to be able to sell their birds without having to pursue a USDA inspected facility.
I could add one thing here is that we'd be more than happy to guide anybody in the audience if they were considering coming under federal inspection to the appropriate, the Raleigh district office is in charge of New Jersey inspection, and that staff is very helpful. So again, we would put that out there. There are a lot of sites where facilities could be constructed, and again, with federal inspection, you have, many avenues to sell that product across state lines. Again, I said to even export certain stuff. So that one might be another route as well too.
Suzanne, did you want to?
No, I didn't know that was an option. Thank you, Paul. That actually helps us. If people reach out to us, then we can direct them, and that maybe they can still get an inspection, even if they are not, they don't have the flock requirements, and they think they're exempt by some of the other requirements. So I appreciate that. This has been really great information.
If they have a facility that you approve, the next step would be applying for a grant of federal inspection. So if the locals say, yes, we could have this here, water, solid waste, all that stuff. Yeah, that could be, that could definitely be a path for people in the audience, or it might not be. Again, but it is available, and there are options.
Diane in the chat is just asking us to clarify specifically that if they want to sell poultry directly from their farm, that they can process birds themselves so long as they're following sanitary guidelines, which I guess then would be inspected by your, well, not you, Suzanne, necessarily, because I don't know if they're in Burlington County, but yeah, they just want us to clarify that they are able to sell, homegrown and processed birds at their own property.
So for the feds, the answer is yes. But again, check local and then state. I'm not sure state, but I would obviously start local, but for feds, yeah, absolutely you can.
I don't know if I have an answer for that. We haven't come across that. If it came across, we would have to probably reach out and figure out a way to do it. If it's a state facility, Jessica, that would be your office and not ours. It would only be if it was local, but we would still have to reach out and coordinate efforts and figure out what is the appropriate facility. Because again, the product has to be from an approved source, and that approved source could mean a bunch of different things, actually. But no, this is something I've never come across before. Years ago, we had a person who wanted to do almost kind of like an open bird market type thing, where you walked up and you pointed to the bird and you said, that's the bird I want, and they would be slaughtered, but you were really buying the bird. And so there was a little bit of a different situation there, because you were getting it from the facility and it was being processed. The bird you wanted, it wasn't being packaged or anything of that sort. But that's my mind's kind of blown. I'm learning a lot today. Thank you.
No, it's great. And I believe those, they're called live bird markets, and they're all over the state. And they're in a lot of different types of communities. And again, that's done with a retail license, and under that live bird market through that exemption. Again, know your exemption, I just implore you to study that exemption. Once you have that exemption, approach your local health department, approach your zoning. And that's one thing, is it a freestanding facility that's already approved to do such operations?
But I'll be honest, this is something we've nobody's ever come to us with this. Now, if people are doing it, we don't know about it. Nobody's approved to do this in our county. But it may come up. It may certainly come up in the future. So this is good to know.
I could just give you a quick example. There was a gentleman that was raising, he was also buying in types of birds, and he was slaughtering these birds without any exemption, without any USDA inspection. I'm an investigator. I deal with compliance. So our postures, of course, from a compliance standpoint, it branches off to, am I opening up an investigation or am I providing education? Sometimes it's both, right? So with this gentleman, well, how can I do this, Paul? Well, you know, and he was supplying supermarkets. And there's a slaughterhouse in Passaic County. And what he did was he did not skip a beat. Okay, we had to deal with the birds that weren't produced under federal inspection, and that fell under our prohibited act. But once that was cleared up, he started to take the live birds, have them transported over to a USDA slaughterhouse, and he was getting them inspected. And he was, the next week, he was selling to the grocery stores again legally. And I said to him, God forbid if someone got sick, you carry all that liability. Okay, again, a protection to the and then the unbeknownst customer. This guy could be the greatest, the most cleanest, and doing everything right. Okay, but that doesn't really matter if there was a problem, if someone filed a complaint, if someone got sick, ill, or injured, whatever the case may be, the person, it was not legal what they were doing. And, you know, that saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So we were able to quickly get him into compliance. He found the slaughterhouse, and that next week, and we do compliance visits with him, and he's been very successful. All the records, all the birds have been what we've seen. Everything appears to be in compliance. So they didn't miss a beat, and he didn't have a problem getting into a slaughterhouse. And if someone is experiencing that, we do have websites with listed of slaughter. We can't recommend a slaughterhouse, but there are many slaughterhouses within the state. And Tom, if you could just weigh in, if people were to look for out-of-state processing of their birds, could you just weigh in?
I posted both our guidelines for poultry exemptions because our website has a ton of information and you could spend the rest of your life looking for it. I posted you a direct link, as well as a direct link to our meat and poultry inspection directory, and you can sort by state, by activity. Like, I want to just look at chicken slaughtering or chicken processing in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, New York, Connecticut, what have you. It's an interactive map. You can fool around with it. It's pretty neat. You just hover over the results and it tells you who that firm is and their contact information. So that should be pretty good information, I hope, anyway. And there is someone, Rebecca has her hand raised.
Yeah, Rebecca, I do want to give you an opportunity to ask your question, since there seems to be a lot of, case by case, responses. So please ask your question.
Okay, can you guys just clarify? I'm a little confused. So if you slaughter your own poultry under the exemption, are you or are you not allowed to sell it within the state? Because the USDA FSIS guidelines say that you may distribute the poultry to customers in the state where it was slaughtered and processed without inspection, but I believe someone just verbally said that you cannot. So what's true?
So from the federal point of view, you absolutely can.
Okay.
That may differ, and we just speak about it, may differ depending on where you are within New Jersey and the state can weigh in, but for feds, absolutely you can, as far as we're concerned. But you do have to meet, again, local and
Right,
state
the
rules
cleanliness
and regs.
standards,
Yep.
all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have local approval to be able to do any of that first. So just
Right.
because it meets exemption under the federal law, you have to go to the local municipality first to see if they're even going to allow you to operate a business like that.
Right. And then pending that approval, which I personally already have and have done with my town, then do you have to get approval from every town that you have a customer in?
No, you just need approval from, like, your customer comes to you.
Yes,
Yeah, you just need your own town approval.
okay.
And
Thank you.
I just want to weigh in, there's also methods of sale, who you're selling to. Is it a retail customer? Is it a restaurant? Is it an institution? You know, those are, you know, we'd be more than happy to go offline with you and discuss with you in detail, so that you're satisfied with the responses here today.
And who would I contact if I would like to do
Thomas Calero,
that?
you can contact me, and you know, we could get to know each other, so I can help you better and get you, if I can't answer your question, get you to the right people that can. Again, we want to help you.
Thank you.
Thank you for speaking up with the question, Rebecca. I did have one more question regarding, you reminded me with the, you know, live bird markets. I've seen a few homesteaders offer basically come and learn how to process your own bird as like a home workshop kind of thing, to teach other homesteaders how to slaughter their own birds. And would that fall under the sort of live bird market process, because people are paying in advance and they leave with a bird? And I'm not sure if that is sort of some kind of exemption where you are buying the bird in advance and then you're just taking this course to learn how to process that bird. I'm not sure if you've ever come across this, but it's definitely something that happens, so I wanted to bring it up.
Tom, do you want to take that one?
I mean, there's a million exceptions. You're talking about a live or a custom facility?
I'm talking about a homesteader who has 30 chickens themselves, and they want to teach others how to go about slaughtering their own birds for either personal consumption or just, you know, however they want to take their homestead or their business forward. But it's just you know, teaching each other sort of.
From a regulatory standpoint, we would not be concerned. You know, if they were looking for, you know, someone from USDA or the rules and regs, if the home center wanted to do something other than just take them home and put it in their pot, you know, and have chicken stew tonight, you know, we'd be happy to kind of provide, from our perspective, the rules and regs. But yeah, we wouldn't be concerned if someone just teaching a class. And yeah, obviously you'd have to, you know, probably sacrifice a bird or two, right, in order to teach someone how to properly dispatch a bird. Yeah, we wouldn't be concerned with that. But, you know, obviously provided any good commercial practices, i.e. humane handling, you know, what was taking place.
Suzanne or Jessica, I'm not sure if there's other approvals that are needed for that type of practice. Even if you're not selling the birds yourself, you're just teaching other homesteaders how to go about slaughtering their own birds for personal consumption.
I don't think there would be anything, but I can definitely find that out for sure.
Okay.
I think the local approvals would really be the big thing there, just because you're dealing with waste potentially, and there's just so many other pieces of it, and the zoning aspect, and making sure you go through the township, because sometimes these things pop up and nobody knows about them, and then we stumble across them when we get a complaint for something completely unrelated. And we realize they've got, you know, chickens and there's slaughtering going on the premises. And then we have to do some investigative work to figure out exactly what's going on and if it's okay. I didn't even know that was a thing. That's very interesting.
Yeah, I've actually seen advertisements for classes like that.
A lot. I've seen, but I think, you know, we're kind of nearing the end, and I just wanted to give our roundtable speakers an opportunity to give sort of a final word, sort of final recommendations. I really appreciate that you're all making yourselves available after the fact for people to get more information, and I can include that in our post-webinar follow-up email. But maybe just if anyone would like to speak up and sort of summarize what they have to say, then we can wrap up.
So my whole big takeaway is always contact us, call us first, because it's way less uncomfortable to have a conversation up front before you start doing these things than to have us stumble across you doing it and then have to figure it out and how we can get it to work after the fact. And it could potentially impact your operation. It could potentially impact your business. And it's a lot more uncomfortable, I imagine. So communication is really important.
I would also just second what Suzanne said, you know, it's have the open conversations. I mean, I was at local health for almost 22 years, and it is super important. And I feel like health has always been encouraged to educate people, and we want to get you on the right path. So, you know, just, you know, having those conversations, we can get you connected to the right people. And you know, I think people are afraid. No question's a dumb question. Like, I'm learning things today myself, and I've been in the, you know, the retail industry for over 20 years. Like Suzanne said, there's things that when you don't get exposed to these things, it's near impossible to know all of the rules and regulations. It's just a matter of having the right context to ask those people those questions. So, you know, feel free to reach out. Your local is huge, and I'm always here at the state. You know, we appreciate the communication.
Thank you. I'd just like to thank everybody in attendance, and thank you for Rutgers, Kate, and all the presenters. And I have an admiration for people that are involved with homesteading, and they want to take care of themselves, and they want to take care of their families, and they want to be able to provide quality ingredients to people, or afford people to have, you know, whether it be a pasture raised farm, whatever the case may be. My hat's off to you, and we'd like to be a help to you. And thank you again. Thank you very much for having me.
Many thanks to our panelists for being here for the roundtable discussion. I really appreciate that everyone, you know, comes to the table with an educational viewpoint, trying to help everybody accomplish what they're trying to accomplish in their individual lives.